out of the top 10 Forbes most influential celebrities, 7 out of the 10 are Black or brown. That is mainstream. That is pop culture. So that's the biggest thing with corporations, because it's still getting thrown into the diversity corner or the multicultural corner or the small and niche thing, not realizing that America's biggest and most populous cities like New York, LA, Houston, Chicago, Miami are already majority today.
This is Beyond Influential with Brittany Crystal. Join Brittany as she chats with today's thought leaders about the power of influence, how it's developed, and how they get us to consume both on and offline. Here's your host, Brittany Crystal.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Beyond Influential. I am honored today to have Lili Gil Valletta with me. She is so impressive, and I don't say that lightly. She's a former corporate executive turned entrepreneur who is helping companies and the world at large realize the incredible importance minorities and women play in business. After 10 years at Johnson & Johnson, she's now the CEO and co-founder of Cien and CulturIntel. Cien is a data-driven consulting and marketing firm that helps business leaders and Fortune 500 companies unlock the power of today's diverse marketplace. And CulturIntel is a technology platform that uses big data and AI tools to report actionable intelligence from the millions of discussions happening every day globally. She's won countless awards for her work related to diversity and minority issues. She's even coined and trademarked her own term, cultural intelligence. She's been featured on Forbes, CNN Money, Huffington Post, among others. She's an on-air contributor for channels like Fox News and CNN. She has an MBA. She has a college degree. She's also a graduate of the Harvard Kennedy School. And she's also the creator of Dreamers Ventures, a product innovation accelerator bringing together a best-in-class alliance of business experts to search, mentor, and launch products created by minorities and women. She's an immigrant from Colombia, and she's a mom. I'm in love with Lili already. Lili, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So for the audience, can you please walk us through your background and like everything, even from the start to the time you came to the U.S.?
Absolutely. You know, I have a fascinating journey. I guess you could say living the American dream. I originally came from Colombia, where, when I landed here, I was with a suitcase, a student visa. I didn't speak a word of English and just had a big dream to, first of all, learn how to speak the language and eventually, hopefully, achieve a big job in business, because I was focused on business at the time. So certainly it has been an interesting journey, and my experience with culture from a very early age when I came to the United States has always carried with me through my corporate career. So I first had a job in Orlando with Disney when they were partnering up with Florida Hospital to build this hospital of the future at Celebration Health. And eventually I moved over to Johnson & Johnson, moved from sunny Florida to New Jersey to have a standard corporate career, because I always thought I wanted to be some sort of C-level executive before turning 40. Never, ever, ever thought about becoming an entrepreneur, but just goes to show you got to be open for what life shows you and follow your passion. And here I am now running my own business, but it's been quite a journey. So I'll save some for more questions that you probably have for me, so we keep it interesting.
So what age were you when you actually came to the U.S.? And was the U.S. always a big dream, or did you want to go back to Colombia?
Yeah, so I was 17 when I came to the U.S. by myself without my parents. So that in itself was very scary. And I always wanted to come to the States. Ironically, I used to tell my parents, I want to go to a big, famous university like Harvard. But of course, that is cost prohibited when you're a foreign student. And, I think my parents looked into it, but got scared and didn't know what to do, even if I had this bold aspiration. And ironically, I ended up in probably the smallest, most unknown little private college in Texas as my first American experience, because it was like the sheltered little place where I could be safe by myself. But eventually, I think later in life, I checked off my Harvard bug, but it didn't start like that. It did not. I wanted to be here. I made myself get here, but then the journey from then on had to be very, very self-made, and I had to figure it out on my own.
How was it adjusting to American culture when you first get here? I can't even imagine just showing up somewhere like another country without your family, without any of it.
Yeah. So it's so funny you asked that because it's my favorite recount was, when I landed in Texas, which of course, Texas has its own culture. So talk about an American experience that was quite unique from day one. And when people knew that I spoke Spanish, they said, wait, you speak Spanish. Are you Mexican? And I was so confused. I'm like, why am I supposed to be Mexican, right? I was so innocent and oblivious to whatever was in people's heads. And then when I said Colombia, I would always get, oh, Pablo Escobar.
Okay.
And I was like, why are people labeling me? I'm like, why are they not picking more fun stuff like coffee or other things, right? So I realized early on that there was a cultural gap and that people were putting all these labels on me. Later on, I discovered that I'm supposed to be Hispanic or Latina. But it was fascinating because I never thought about filters about ethnicity or place of origin in Colombia. You're just Colombian. So that alone was a very interesting journey. But one that I took as fuel because I said, okay, let me educate people instead of throwing myself a pity party about how people didn't understand me. I said, well, let me make it my mission to remove some of these cultural barriers. And ironically, that has inspired everything I do to this day. But it started when I landed at the age of 17, for sure.
So what were you studying when you went to college out there? And then was the goal to move to a big city like LA or New York, or did you not care?
I honestly had no clue where I wanted to go. I had a very kind of big picture objective, which was at some point in my life, I will be in a corner office and be a powerful corporate executive. Where exactly? I guess I was open to it. In what field? I wasn't sure either. So I tell this to college students all the time that are freaking out that they're a sophomore and have no clue what they're going to do. I had no clue what I was going to do, but you got to be open to the experience. So I was a business finance major. So I knew it had to do with business and money. Mm-hmm. But then when I did my first finance internship, my junior year, I hated it. And I was freaking out. I was like, oh no, I'm about to graduate and I don't like this stuff. I'm a people person. I want to be in front. I don't want to be like stuck with spreadsheets, even though I do love numbers. But anyway, then later one of my advisors said, don't worry, just get an MBA, do it in marketing if you want, and you'll be fine. But I did not have a clear path except the vision of being in some powerful corner office somewhere. So that was clear. The city, I guess it could be anywhere.
So what was it about corporate that appealed to you so much?
I guess it looked big and powerful. I guess I'm not, clearly I am not a millennial who now everyone wants to create their own company and you want to, carve your own destiny. I was not of that generation. My mind was, wow, power and influence in business comes by being in some big name corporation. So that was the path that I chose. And I was, blessed to be able to do that at a big, huge corporation like Johnson & Johnson. So I just felt it was a good platform to demonstrate that I could become this big executive I thought I wanted to be.
So did you go directly from college into your MBA or did you work in between?
I did. And I'm so glad you're mentioning this, not to get political, but it was the only way I could stay in the United States with a student visa. Which is a lot of the whole show and immigration myths and things. But there's a lot of foreign students that are college educated here, but you lose your status as a student when you're no longer a student. So there's really no easy way for you to stay or change your status. So I was very deliberate and quick into enrolling into my MBA, which luckily, my employer picked up the bill and they paid for my MBA because I was in a big kind of leadership program. So that was very unique. But I had to do because otherwise I would have had to go back to Colombia without any immigration status.
Yeah. So aside from needing that student visa, did you actually get any value out of the MBA? Because I know that's a big conversation. And you were just talking, you're in DC for Entrepreneurship Week. A lot of people say if you want to be an entrepreneur, you don't need to get an MBA. But if you want to work at a corporation like a Johnson & Johnson, it'd be very helpful.
That's a very, very tricky question, because certainly for resume purposes, the college degree is no longer sufficient for the big corporate jobs. You're absolutely right. And at some point, you're going to hit a wall unless you have those 3 letters after your name. So I think I agree with what you're saying. I hadn't thought about it, but if you do want to follow the entrepreneurial route, I'm not saying that postgraduate education is not valuable, but you can be more selective into topics instead of just a degree with a title like MBA that gives you handpicked skill sets that are critical for an entrepreneur. That may not be the official curriculum of an MBA. But I think it's also delusional of entrepreneurs, especially young ones, because when you're in your 20s, you're invincible, right? To pretend to know it all, or just by Googling an article, think you're going to figure it out. But I don't think the MBA is a requirement. Maybe my friends in academics are not going to like this. But advanced education that is targeted to what you need in that journey that you're on, maybe as an entrepreneur, is important because you do not know it all.
I really like that perspective. And when did you actually go to the Harvard Kennedy School? Because I'm assuming that's the kind of thing you're talking about, but I'm not sure if you were already in your corporate career at that time or that was immediately following your MBA.
So I did my MBA. I did my 10 years as a corporate executive. And this is the funniest thing, like in 2011, where I had already left my corporate job, I got selected by the World Economic Forum as what they call young global leaders. So this is a very kind of, now I've learned after the fact that it's a very kind of like hand-selected group of people from all over the planet that are selected every year to be part of the forum and have exposure to the mentors, the resources, the networks that represents, including, Davos, where every head of state comes, and you get invited to that, which is incredible. But I got added to that. I still don't know who nominated me or how I was selected. It's like a mystery of life. And one of the things that the World Economic Forum does is they actually sponsor executive education, an entire full program for the young global leaders. I mean, you still have to apply and there's limited seats, and I was able to get into the program. And that's how I did the Global Leadership and Public Policy program at the Harvard Kennedy School. And it was so surreal because it took me back to being the 13, 14-year-old version of me in Colombia, always daydreaming about going to a big school. I remember nagging my mom about it. And by the time I went to the Kennedy School, my mom had already passed away, unfortunately. So it was a very interesting emotional journey for me, because more than the Harvard title or whatever, it was more like seeing that life works when you work hard. And there I was, honoring my mom's legacy and my dreams as a little girl, finally standing there without having to pay a dime for it. So that was a very symbolic moment, and that's how I ended up there. So I got to thank the World Economic Forum for that sponsorship.
So just to stick on the World Economic Forum, what did you learn coming out of that program?
Oh my goodness. What's interesting with these big schools, and now I'm really affiliated and close to Harvard. It's the fact that the professors that teach you are like, you're learning economics from like a Nobel Prize in economics. You're hearing about like how to create a movement for peace or things like that from like heads of state. So it's not like a case study on a piece of paper. So when you're closer to a real testimonial like that from an expert, the world becomes smaller to you. And that sounds weird to say, but it becomes smaller, meaning all of a sudden the playground that you have or the runway to make an impact is attainable, and it's bigger than your city, your state, your country. So I think what Harvard did for me was make me realize that what I do has a much broader impact than one of my own little limiting thoughts or the United States as a market. So I would say that, and obviously the network and the friendships that you build. A lot of the folks that I went to Harvard with are still my friends, and they're in different places all over the world. So you build friendships that in other settings, they wouldn't be consolidated as strongly as we did during the program. So I would say those two things. So yes, there's technicalities and things that are academic, but I think it's much bigger than that, what these programs deliver.
Yeah, for a lot of people who are kind of the anti-school because of the entrepreneurship, because of what's going on in terms of social media, that you can just start a business, or that's the thought that's out there. That network is what these schools and the higher education provide. They're think tanks if you do it right, and you'll have a network that lasts forever through your business career if you do it right. So
absolutely. And for people that are listening, because it sounds so snobby to talk about Harvard, I mean, I want them to know that I went to like a no-name undergrad school in Texas, like a little Christian school called Southwestern Adventist University that nobody knows. And then went to Rollins in Orlando, which is a pretty good school for Florida standards, but nationally people don't recognize it either. So I guess where I'm going with that is that, yes, where I was, because I could afford it and I was there, I gave it my best. But it doesn't mean that you have to have the Ivy League, title to be taken seriously. It's hard work, perseverance, discipline, and sticking to what you want to accomplish and having the focus to do it and follow through, what people will notice. And eventually I made it to Harvard, but a lot of people just default to that part of my resume, but that's not how it started. So anyway, just for the listeners, so they don't feel like, oh, yeah, okay, it's easy to say Harvard, this or that. No. It starts where you're at now, going that extra mile and give it your best if you really want to accomplish. I don't care, entrepreneurship or professional, it doesn't happen by chance. It does not.
So that being said, a company like Johnson, are they still in the mindset of looking for people who are not only MBAs, but also who come from the Ivy League?
I think all companies have that in their recruitment strategy, which is unfortunate because then you keep kind of dipping into the same places and you may be missing out on that community college kid that has hustled and worked 3 jobs to graduate, and maybe they have a 3.0 GPA, but it's because they've been working 3 jobs, right? And there's something intangible with that emotional intelligence and that grit that is much bigger than the university title. I think corporations are starting to notice that. It's so funny that now, because entrepreneurship is so hot and sexy, corporations are realizing that they have to tap into that mindset somehow and make it sexy for them too, instead of some boring corporate job, which is why there's now corporate accelerators. Johnson & Johnson has an innovations lab, and different companies have their own versions of that, and they have their own like investment funds and accelerators and all, because they do want to be able to attract the mindset without putting it in the box of a job with a title that requires 5, 10, 12 years to get to whatever level. So I'm seeing the difference. I think it's the only way for them to be able to attract people with that grit that go beyond just wanting a title.
So let's talk about Johnson & Johnson. You're getting your MBA. How do you end up there? Why do you like them? Why do they like you? And what role do you start in?
So I actually, this is so funny. I'm totally dating myself because I had met somebody from Johnson & Johnson in Orlando when I was working in this project at the Disney properties called Celebration Health. And by the way, if anyone ever is in the parks, go to Celebration Health, like pretend something hurts. It's amazing. It doesn't look like a hospital. It's like a resort. But anyway, so I was there and somebody from J&J say, hey, you should check us out. We have this leadership development program thing. And I went online. This is way before where sophisticated online forms, upload your resume type of things existed. So literally I sent like my information into what felt like the black hole. And like 6 months later, I actually got contacted by J&J saying, hey, we got your information. Are you interested? And I forgot that I had even sent it to begin with. I was like, what are you calling me about? I was so confused. But anyway, so they said, would you be interested in coming to an interview? And I was like, no, you're in New Jersey and I'm in Florida. I don't want to do that. Of course, I didn't say that, but I thought about it. And then I did follow through almost for like my own personal satisfaction. I said, well, let me go through the process and see if I make it. And sure enough, I think I had like 6 interviews. It was so like grilling. And only like 15 people were invited into this leadership program. So I was spoiled in a way because my job wasn't like a real job at J&J from day one. I was in an accelerated program that every 8 months rotated me. And you're supposed to be pushed every 8 months to move up, stretch, have more responsibilities, see more places around the country or the company. So I did that for 2 years. And of course, when you come out of that program, which is kind of like a leadership machine, they invest so much in you. At a very, very young age, I was already, a manager with the staff and very quickly became an executive before barely turning 30. Which was exciting, but very scary at the same time. But I moved a lot. I moved 6 times when I was at J&J. And I had all kinds of different jobs and different functions. It's a huge company. People think it's the baby company, but really it's a healthcare innovation pharma company. And my last job was as the head of global director of marketing services in the pharma sector, where I had staff in Europe and in the US, and it was a big job. I remember in an employee survey that they report like the charts for, that's when I realized that there was only one data point at the executive level that was under 30. And I was like, oh, that's me. So technically I was like the youngest executive in the company at the time. But it was fun and it gave me the foundation for what I can do today.
So how long did it take you to actually climb that ladder, and how much work is really required to make it happen?
Yeah, I'm so glad you're asking that, because I guess with years and wisdom comes the confidence to recognize the good and the bad and the ugly. So was it hard? Yes. Did it consume my life? Yes. But so much so that it impacted my personal life. Like I got divorced at a really young age. And I'm saying it out loud because I want people not to be like, oh my gosh, you can't have it all. Well, you can, but you have to define what having it all means to you. All that traveling and having no limits with my time was great for my career, but you got to be able to balance that with your personal side. So it was hard on that side, but I made a choice and I was doing what I was doing, and it ended up happening, that I got divorced really young. But at the same time, I did check off all of those corporate, to-dos or stripes that I had to earn to be able to continue to get promoted very quickly. So, international responsibilities, check. More than 5 direct reports, check. Moving across functions, check. So you do have to kind of have that mental path of the things you have to check off so that take you seriously on your way up. But it doesn't come without a price, for sure.
So people look from the outside and it seems like executives have a super cushy job. As you rise up in the ranks, does it get harder? Is it only more work, or does it get easier because you can delegate your responsibilities?
I think it's both. It gets easier on the executional side because, yes, if you have a good team, you delegate and they can bring to life the stuff that you have as your vision or goals or whatever. But it's harder because maybe you're not spending that much time in doing, but the thinking, the vision, the culture, the ability to continue to inspire people is on your shoulders. So it's almost like there's an emotional weight that does get bigger, which is why successful lead. Anyone can be a manager or a doer or a project lead, but it's very different to be a leader because it takes that emotional thing and just staying up and upbeat while everyone else may be down. And that takes a lot. That's why they say that us women are better leaders because there is a lot of that collaboration and intuition that comes with as you rise up. But the air does get thinner. Politics get bigger and more complicated to navigate. And the stakes are higher because in a way you can't afford to be down because you have an entire team depending on your ability to inspire them to do more. So it's a lot, but it's exciting if you enjoy it.
So what qualities would you say make the best leaders, whether that's inside an organization or outside an organization?
It definitely is. And this applies to everyone, by the way, whether you are leading a non-for-profit or you are the chair of your school board or you have your own entrepreneurial thing going or a corporate job. A real leader and a powerful leader is able to get other people to perform at their best, to execute their full potential, and do it because they want to and not because they have to. So that really is what a leader is able to do. Get the best out of all people around them and getting it out in a joyful, exciting, purposeful way. Anyone can boss you around and you'll do it and be like, wow. But it's very different if you're staying late in the office. And I've seen this where people are staying late, not because they have to, but because they don't want to disappoint the leader or because the mission is so big, you don't want to fail the greater good of the mission. That's what leadership does.
And do you have any tips for navigating the politics of a corporate environment?
Yes, I have a bunch that have had work with me. Everybody talks about mentors, and a mentor, I almost feel like it's a counselor, a person you sit with and talk about feedback and good things and bad things. Try this, try that. But you need champions. So champion is somebody with power that is in the room where decisions are being made that speaks on your behalf. And that may not necessarily be the same as a mentor because the mentor kind of knows like the dirty laundry in your house. The champion does know enough about you to authentically know you, but their mission is one to elevate your potential, who you are, almost be like your PR agent internally. And a lot of people don't differentiate those two, nor have champions working on their behalf. So that's one definitely that is a must. And another one, and I think this is something that is common to us women, definitely an issue for minorities because culturally we don't do it. I don't want to call it self-promotion, but it is giving your accomplishments and your voice a platform. And maybe it's not you tooting your own horn, but creating ways where the value that you're bringing is recognized. And it doesn't have to be just me and the Lili show, but maybe there is a staff meeting where out of the blue, you just say, hey, I just want to say thank you to my team who just worked with me in completing this and this project. It was such hard work. It was super successful. Thanks everyone that was involved. So you're acknowledging the team, but also putting on the map the fact that the thing got done. We don't do that enough. And there's statistics. I'm not just being sexist with this, but that guys are better at doing that and raising their hand and kind of sharing what they do. And we as women are more hesitant, definitely minorities too. So it's being more intentional into putting on the map so that people know that what you've accomplished is great and has great value and not just wait for others to notice because they may not notice. So that's important in a corporation or even in your corporate life or personal brand. Now with social media, we should be more intentional about how that is done.
I don't know if you saw it, but there was an article in the New York Times a few weeks ago about a Girl Scout who's starting a raise your hand movement for girls because she noticed that the girls in her class weren't raising their hands nearly as frequently as boys. and why that is. And I don't know, they need to be like a certain percentage sure before they raise their hands, or if a boy has like any kind of idea, he raises his hand. So I think that is a very real phenomenon. I don't have the data on it, but just living life as a woman, you see it. And so,
absolutely.
And so that also brings me to my question about, and I think this was just going to come up anyway, different treatment being a woman inside the organization. And if you ever had any of your thoughts kind of devalued because people would claim either maybe affirmative action or anything along those lines. Did you ever have to encounter anything like that?
Yeah.
Along those lines.
You and I are biased. Everybody's biased. It's just the way the human brain is wired. We interpret the world based on the social norms or cultural norms that we grow up with. And unfortunately, yes, traditionally, the role of women, even though we're now so empowered and bold and in places of power and all of that, your brain plays tricks on you, and the interpretation of a woman still is soft, emotional, caring, which are great traits that makes us amazing, but that maybe are not as valued in a business setting. So I felt it a couple of times, but I used to kind of like laugh out loud inside, because some of my favorite moments were when I was negotiating a multi-million dollar contract, let's say, in my corporate life. And I would walk into the negotiation room and you could almost see the guys on the other side of the table, almost like loosen up and be like, oh, this is going to be easy. Like, oh, the cute girl just walked in and I was like really young. And I love that. I was like, good, put your guard down, because I will totally shock you and you won't even notice that I'm totally beating you up in this process of negotiating. But so definitely the feeling undermined in a silent, subtle way, I felt, and I have felt a million times. So you can either, again, let that thing get you like mad and judge, or work it to your advantage to surprise with how ridiculously good and smart you are on the other end. But it happens, unfortunately. It happens to minorities. It happens when you have an accent. And I always tell people, I don't know how I got rid of my accent, by the way, but for my friends and family that have an accent, I say, listen, let them interpret whatever they want about you. That means you're bilingual and they're not. So own it. Move on. Look, Sofia Vergara turned herself into the highest paid actress in the world by playing up her accent. So dang it, do something with it. So but it's there. It's there. I think we can preach until we're blue in the face that we're going to try to change people's minds, but it's the hardest thing to do. What we can do is change and control ourselves and how we carry ourselves in those situations. And also how maybe systematically you debias the environment or the system. Also how maybe moving names from resumes, because it's been proven that way you don't really go into, oh, that's a woman, that's a man, oh, that sounds Black, that sounds Hispanic. So it's doing things like that instead of trying to change people's hearts and minds. Good luck with that one. We are hardwired in a funny way. But it happens. It happens, so own it and leverage it when you can.
So 10 years at Johnson & Johnson is a long time at one company, and it definitely is nowadays. How did they retain you?
By moving me a lot. I got promoted a lot. I got different jobs probably every 18 months.
Wow.
That's the way.
Were they just very conscious of it? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Continue.
Yeah, no. I was not. The opportunities just came to me, and I had that mental checklist in my head too. Like, okay, I need to do an international assignment. I need to do this. So I let people know. And one of my bosses gave me the best advice ever, which is so simple, but so powerful. He was like, because I told him, I said, hey, I want to become like a director, which is actually already executive level in a big corporation. And he said, well, if you want to become a director, don't wait to get the title to start behaving like one, just start today. So behave one level up. I was like, ooh. So that way when a performance review is happening, nobody has to wonder whether Lili is ready to be a director because they've already seen her behaving like one. I thought it was so simple. I'm like, oh, you're right. So he's like, behave one level up. Okay. So anyway, that was like very simple advice. But yeah, they retained me by giving me opportunity. And I think also retain me by allowing me to create and be an intrapreneur while I still had a day job. Like I created all kinds of crazy projects and things that were not in my job description. And I wasn't prevented from doing so, which was good because it motivated me to feel like I was innovating and creating my own thing without having to kind of have to jump ship or something like that. But I know you're going to get to the question of, and then why did you leave? So I'll hold it for later.
Well, I'm going to get to it right now. I want to know, well, I know why you left, but I want to know exactly why you left, when you felt it was the appropriate time to leave, and if you started building your company while you were at Johnson & Johnson.
Yeah. So I did not start building my company while I was at J&J. But now that I think about it, the muse for what that company was to become definitely was inspired and incubating while I was doing the stuff I was doing at J&J. So I guess without knowing, the constructs of it were already coming to life in my corporate projects. So here's what I did. Being a very kind of vocal and passionate Latina, I noticed that there was not an employee group that brought us together as Hispanics. You know, that was the era when women's groups were sprouting, and then there's the African American group and this and that group. I was like, wait, we don't have one for Hispanics. How about we create one? So I actually was one of the creators of the employee Hispanic group at J&J, which this year had its 16-year anniversary. It's still up and running. And I went there for the anniversary celebration, which I felt like a proud mom. But it was an organization that came together because I felt it was important for us to come together, not to do the Cinco de Mayo party and dance salsa in the cafeteria, but actually to elevate the role that we represent as an economic power for the nation and as America's fastest growing kind of like minority group. We're the one that is the biggest. So I wanted us to be taken seriously and collectively build a voice that could put us on the map for the economic and market value that we represented. So that was the reason why the group was created and is still created and is still in existence. So that initiative gave me the excuse and the inspiration to create the business case for how much money does this market represent? And not just do it based on superficial census data, but a very well done size of price analysis, as I call it. And this is the stuff we do for our clients today. So we can take the sales, the current market size, forecast what it's going to be in the next 3 to 5 years, and you can literally see how big the economic contribution is of diverse markets, with Latinos being like the biggest. So I created this, had a task force. Nobody asked me to do it, presented it to the CEO and the chairman of the company at the time. I was like, I'm going to go as high as it gets. And because it was well done and it was numbers based, it wasn't me having some diversity discussion. It was a numbers discussion. It was very well received. And they said, well, can you help us execute this? I said, absolutely. Let me look for companies that can help us do this with us. So I thought I was going to be finding like the consultant or research company or an agency that could help me. And I couldn't find it. I wanted McKinsey, Deloitte, Accenture type thinking combined with the innovation of creative agencies that could understand culture as an economic driver. And I couldn't find it. So I said, wait a second, this is a business. I should create the company that I can't find to hire. And that was what inspired it. But I guess I had a real case in doing all this work with the task force that I kind of created internally at J&J to see that there was an unmet need in the market. And that's what gave me the passion and like the springboard to say, you know what, let me just go and do it. Even though I love my corporate track and where I was heading with my whole C-level executive before 40 aspiration that I had. But something greater kind of grabbed my heart. I said, let me do this to make an impact, not just in one corporation, but in more than one corporation. And that's when I decided to leave in 2008.
So how long did it take you to actually start the company, to actually get the clients, to actually grow this business?
My goodness. See, that's the magic question. Everybody thinks this entrepreneurship thing is like a magic wand. I said, I'm going to do it. And all of a sudden, yay, it happens. No, it was a lot of risks, crazy risk, because I cashed all of my stock options, which is the stupidest thing anyone can do, by the way. And all my savings, because I was going to be Wonder Woman self-funding my company. And I say that in a derogatory way about my own self, because it's just dumb to do that. There is money available. There are so many resources. So I hope people listening don't ever do that. It sounds very noble to be self-sustained and all of that, bootstrap. Well, I did it and it worked. But in retrospect, it shouldn't be the way to go. But anyway, so yes, I self-funded. My business partner also left Johnson & Johnson. So we were two crazy kind of corporate dropouts. And it was fascinating because our first client came to us. We didn't find it. It was Diageo, the big spirits company. They're the makers of Johnny Walker and Smirnoff and all kinds of fun drinks. They had heard about my work because I was speaking in conferences about diversity as a force for economic growth and things like that. And they said, hey, we heard that you left J&J. Do you think you can come and do that for us here? So they were my first client. It came kind of organically, which was awesome because then it grew into a bigger client. But that's how it happened. So then one executive tells another and another. And I don't know if I'm too proud of admitting it publicly, but it's not like my business growth is the product of some master, business development strategy. A lot of it is executives telling other executives that they should work with us to understand how to turn cultural trends into profits. And then we come in and it's most of it, 90% of it, referrals.
So did you know how much to charge right out of the gate? Did you have to do a lot of experimenting with exactly what you were offering versus how much you're charging?
Oh my gosh. I realized how little I knew when I started putting, I was in the corporate life reviewing other people's proposals. And you're so smart picking at somebody else's numbers. But then when you have to write your own, it's so hard. I probably left easily millions of dollars on the table by not charging right at the beginning. We just don't know. And when you're starting, you're so scared to overprice or, oh my gosh, is that too expensive? And especially in a services business or a value business where it's not like I'm selling a widget that I have cost of goods and blah, blah, blah formulas. Yes, I have cost of goods, but it's at a premium. It's a value-based pricing, which is so hard. So I think to this day, I'm still tweaking pricing on a lot of the things that I do. I subscribe to industry things and ask people, look for mentors that were in the industry, whatever. But that's one of the things I think entrepreneurs fail at. They're either delusional, charging too much, because I've seen that. Oh, my hair product is so revolutionary. And I'm like, but you're more expensive than everything that is at Whole Foods right now. That makes no sense. But at the same time, most of us, unfortunately, underprice ourselves. So that's tricky. It's a tricky formula that I'm still learning every day.
So I want to go back to something you said about being self-funded. I think a lot of people actually give the opposite advice and say that you should, if you can, bootstrap yourself because that way you don't give up equity. Why do you feel the opposite?
Well, I feel you can still get access to money without giving away equity. I guess it depends how you get that money. For us as women, there's 1,000,001 things for women these days. I wish in my era, when I started my entrepreneurial, journey, there were things like, if Indiegogo or crowdfunding or stuff like that just didn't exist. So that's what I'm saying. Exhaust every way to get cash that is not an equity trade-off. And I'm not saying in lieu of you putting your own money, because that shows how much you believe in yourself, but not exhausting all of your money when there's other resources available. So I think it's a mix, and I am with you on the whole point of not diluting yourself, but it's getting creative and open to alternative sources that don't dilute you that are available.
So I was hoping you could talk about, or you can name some of the clients that you currently have, and what are the biggest misconceptions you've seen these corporate clients are doing when trying to appeal to diverse communities?
There are different ones. You could probably see them on my website, but there's like, and I don't want them to get upset at me, so I leave the innocent nameless. So a lot of Fortune 100s are my clients in the consumer products industry, in healthcare and farm, big pharma, financial services. And basically, here is the biggest misconception, and it can be codified in such a simple way. A lot of people are still stuck in this concept of doing multicultural marketing, which is kind of like niche and small and specialized, the Hispanic thing, the African American thing. Like putting a jalapeno on top and calling it Mexican food. That's like, oh, let's translate the brochure. That's our Hispanic strategy. I'm like, no. This is the biggest, and it's simple yet complicated. It's graduating from marketing to a multicultural America, from doing multicultural marketing to marketing to a multicultural America. That's the key. So it's no longer about seeing this as a small thing or a niche opportunity, but understanding that 100% of the population growth of America, therefore 100% of new customers, happen to be diverse segments. And no, they're not acculturating, and no, they're not becoming homogeneous. If anything, it's the new mainstream. That's why we see that out of the top 10 Forbes most influential celebrities, 7 out of the 10 are Black or brown. That is mainstream. That is pop culture. So that's the biggest thing with corporations, because it's still getting thrown into the diversity corner or the multicultural corner or the small and niche thing, not realizing that America's biggest and most populous cities like New York, LA, Houston, Chicago, Miami are already majority minority today. So it's just bad business for you to continue to think that's small when it's the thing that is driving all the growth. So I spend a lot of time evangelizing, in a way, to show numbers that there needs to be a mind shift. And luckily, there's still a lot of need to do that, which keeps me in business.
So are these people just out of touch, or why are they so disconnected from what's actually going on?
I think a little bit of it is lack of exposure. We feel comfortable in our bubbles, and a lot of, unfortunately, the workforce not always represents the face of the market. So you become kind of like blindly oblivious to it in an innocent way. I like to think it's not deliberate. They're not trying to be mean and exclude people. And the other portion of it is analytics, which is why I'm so obsessed now with our data science practice, because data removes opinion. Data is data, period. And many times the sales numbers for a given corporation or the market penetration or market share is not looked into through the lens of like, oh, who are the customers that are behind that market share, so that you can see whether you're underdeveloped or overdeveloped. Hopefully you're not, but underdeveloped that you could tap into for growth. So it's simple math, by the way. Let me make it easy, because I know, for your listeners, here's simple math. So LA today is 60% made up of minorities. Mm-hmm. Actually, to be more exact, is actually 63%. So that means that your mainstream market in LA is non-white. Let's just keep it real. Yet, most strategies, budgets, communications, new products are probably still being developed under a mainstream, AKA general market or non-diverse filter. Mm-hmm. So it is impossible for you to tap the full potential of growth in a big city like LA without recognizing that your growth market is that 63% that happens to be diverse, of which, by the way, most of that is Hispanic. So how could you? But many times you don't look at the numbers through that lens. So anyway, I can get you really bored and geeky with the numbers, but net, you bet on growth markets, period.
So where are you getting the data from? That's what I'm interested in. Mm-hmm. What is CulturIntel?
Yeah. So there's actually three sources of data that I use to do what I do. Data source number one, which you and I and everyone has access to, is public information. Census data, Department of Health data, Department of Labor data. I know it takes a couple of Google searches and maybe downloading some big daunting Excel files, but that is available. The demographic makeup of key cities and key markets in America, it's available today from those sources. Because that tells you who your customers are and who lives where. Data source number two is what we are doing now with CulturIntel, which is the voice of the people. What is the voice of the people? All of us, in fact, in the last 2 years, we have produced more data than in the history of humankind. Why? Because we all have a phone and we're all volunteering our opinion and information publicly. And not just on Facebook, everywhere. When you put a comment on that article you just read in the Wall Street Journal, that's public domain and is putting a footprint of your opinion. In a blog, in a topical site, in LinkedIn, in a review that you just put up on Amazon. All of those are the collective voices of the people. So what we are doing is actually taking all of that and using big data tools, artificial intelligence, machine learning, again, fancy tools that allow us to analyze data in quicker and faster ways, so that we can make sense out of the patterns of the opinions of people. So what are people saying that they need, that they like, that they don't like? And based on that, we can look at consumer insight that is informed by the voice of the people. You and I also leave a fingerprint of who we are in our profiles, so I can tell whether that's a woman, a man, Hispanic, Black, or not. So we use the tools also for getting into profile scanning so that we can look at patterns of the voice of the people across different groups or genders. That gives me insight so that I not only know who lives in the market, but what is it that they need. And we inform it from, in this case with CulturIntel, the open source voice of the people. And a third data point is your own data as a business. People have sales data. They have transactions that somewhere in a cashier are being tracked. Unfortunately, most of those systems don't break it down by the profile of the shopper, which is a miss. So we challenge a lot of these corporate leaders to start adding that layer of sophistication into their data so that you can see, okay, if I'm selling this thing in LA, which is 60% diverse, but I look at my transaction data and I'm only getting 20% of the diverse shoppers in that city, that means I could double it or triple it because the market size gives me the right to go after the 60%, or 60% of my sales should be contributed by the diverse segments. So anyway, and then, okay, but what do I sell them? And that is where the consumer insight comes in, so I can really make it as an informed decision to give them what they need instead of just assuming that they like what everybody else likes. So I know I just gave you a fire hose of information and kind of like the method, but at a high level, that's kind of how it works.
So corporations aren't known for moving quickly and being first movers in a space. How hard is it for them to actually implement change once you give them any data, and how quickly can they move on any of these ideas?
You know, it depends on leadership. I hate to kind of like boil it down that way because I've seen corporations where the CEO declares that we're going to evolve from thinking about this as a small thing and rethink the way we go to market and win in a diverse America. And that becomes gospel and everybody follows. But unfortunately, the reason why sometimes it lags behind is because someone in middle management loves this idea and maybe they are bought into it, but they don't have the senior management buy-in. Therefore, it becomes still an optional thing and it doesn't get done. So it moves as fast as the leaders are able to truly believe in the market potential of it or not. Everything else, they have the money and the resources to do it. They can deploy it. They can redirect budgets. But it takes that one leader to declare it as important, and then everyone follows. That's what I've seen over and over again.
Are there any companies you look at that are doing it right?
Yeah, actually, a lot of the consumer product companies, I'm so proud of that. You can see it in the work. You know, when Cheerios is featuring a biracial couple as the mainstream ad, and they get a lot of heat and they don't care, they still leave it up. That is somebody that is leading with cultural intelligence for the mainstream market. When Coca-Cola is doing America the Beautiful in multiple languages in the middle of the Super Bowl and people go all crazy and they want to boycott it and they still stand with it, that is understanding that we live in a new America. P&G also has done it over and over again. They just actually launched a really powerful spot that actually one of my friends was involved in the creative for that, called The Talk, and really talking about the fact that, you know, Black families and parents still have to have the talk with their kids, and they don't want to have the talk anymore. Like, look a certain way, respond a certain way. You know, you don't want to get arrested if you look a certain way. So it's stuff like that that is bold, because they didn't just do that for African Americans. They did it to make a statement in a new America. So there's companies like that that are definitely doing it. And others that are unfortunately making dumb mistakes along the way too, as it relates to culture. Like most recently, Dove got a lot of heat on a digital post about like changing your t-shirt and turning yourself from being Black to being white. And it's like, who did this? Who's approving this? So again, cultural intelligence matters, and it shouldn't be a specialty project. It's just a new way of the world. And we either embrace it or let it run us over, because the demographic shift is happening, period. That's not going to change.
So let's talk about cultural intelligence for a second. You have a trademark on the phrase cultural intelligence. Why is this so crucial today?
So I had a big aha moment, my gosh, well over 10 years ago, when I was thinking about this leadership stuff. And I said, well, everybody preaches IQ and EQ as an important combination for leaders to be successful. But how about cultural intelligence? It was like, but what is it? And I started thinking, I was like, what is it? And I perfected the definition after working with multiple companies as clients now. But it's simple. Cultural intelligence is the ability to be aware of, understand, and apply cultural competence into everyday business. And it follows that very deliberate order. You are first aware, oh, I've read the statistics, there's something happening in America or in my market, you're aware of. Then you understand, that's like, oh my gosh, let me do the homework. How big is it? What do they need? Blah, blah, blah. And then apply is when you basically change the ways you go to market, you make investments, you create new products as you're making business decisions, with the cultural competence to be inclusive of all markets. So that's kind of how it goes. And it has been very well received with the executives that we've introduced to the topic. I need to get myself going and publish that book really fast. Maybe you can help me with that, Brittany. And definitely, I think it's something that my big dream is that everyone uses this language, just as EQ became so popular in the 80s or whenever it did, as the way to make you a complete badass leader that wins.
So this podcast is about influence. What do you think the secret is to influence? And I would love to know if you have any insights as to what drives the Hispanic market to consume versus the more general, in quotes, American market?
Yeah. So influence, if we're talking about consumer influence, I don't think it's a matter of Black or brown or Hispanic. What influences you is what gets to the heart of who you are. I've always said in a kind of a funny way that the secret is with what I call the marketing Macarena. And it's a Macarena because I dance it kind of like the song. You first need to get to the heart before you get to the mind, before you get to the wallet. And why is it a Macarena? If you raise your right hand and you can visualize it, touch your heart, then touch your head, and then touch your wallet, and it goes heart, mind, wallet, heart, mind, wallet. And it's getting to the heart. You can't sell people features and benefits or, oh, how much cheaper or better or safer or non-GMO, whatever thing you're selling. That's getting to the head. But the heart is recognizing that in our case, you asked about Hispanics. I don't care if you're first, second, third generation, music and food are at the core of preserving culture. So leverage that as an opportunity to get to the heart. I always say too that the language is powerful, not because we don't speak English, but we love in Spanish. And because we love in Spanish is using the language, not just to pander and assume we don't know English, but to know that by saying, hola, ¿cómo estás? O te quiero, gets to the heart in a way that I love you will never get to the heart. So it's little interventions like that. I call them cultural winks. Just as if you are in the middle of New York and bump into someone from Texas and you're walking by the store and Rascal Flatts is playing, your heart is going to tick differently, but it's because there is that thing. It's a cultural moment. It's a cultural wing. So it's tricky, but digital has made it easier because long gone are the days when you have one master message that you blast to the world like an atomic bomb and it's supposed to hit everybody. You hyper target, you personalize, you get to the heart in your product and your service and your message. And for that, you got to do the homework to know what really gets to the heart of people, period. And in our case for culture, yes, culture is a big pull into the heartstrings. So leverage it and use it wisely.
So you've been featured on, I listed out so many things, from written publications like Forbes and CNN Money to being on TV on Fox News, CNN. How did you kind of get involved in that sphere? Were you putting your own content out or did these people just find you?
So funny. People think I have like some masterful PR strategy behind me or something. No, it's, and this is again, a lesson for everybody. When you have a voice that is driven by purpose and not by the desire of recognition, the purposeful nature and the heart behind the voice gets noticed. So what happened to me was I started a YouTube channel in 2007. This is way before everybody had like a makeup tutorial on YouTube. But my YouTube channel was about putting out very simple facts about the shifting demographics of America. Like simple. Did you know that 1 in 3 New Yorkers is Hispanic? That means that if you're ignoring that, you're ignoring a third of your market. That's it. Like I put it on short videos. And the New York Daily News called me out of the blue because they saw my channel. I don't know how, but they were like, hey, we're doing a story about people using social media in innovative ways. This happened in like 2010, maybe. So they did the story and it was a full page picture. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea it was going to be this big. And a TV agent guy called me. His name is Greg. Now he's my friend. But at the time I was like, who is this guy? And he started chasing me like, I want to talk to you. We should meet. And I'm like, why? He's like, well, you should be on TV. I'm like, no, I'm building my business. Don't distract me. It's like, yes, this message needs to get out. Anyway, long story short, he did introduce me to a couple of TV executives. And his pitch, which he was doing better than my own pitch, was like, She has a former corporate life, so there's real business experience. Now she's an entrepreneur and an immigrant and somebody that has a very unique perspective in business. I'm not an analyst. I'm not a journalist. I'm not theorizing on the stuff I talk about. I've lived it in my own personal journey. So anyway, long story short, sure enough, one network gave me a shot. I think the first people that booked me were actually on MSNBC. And they kept inviting me. And then because I'm not paid by anyone, or I'm not, again, a journalist, I can go into the different networks, and it just started broadening. So when people were thinking about who do we bring on set that can give us a minority, diverse woman perspective that comes from an entrepreneurial journey or an immigrant journey or a diverse business journey, they thought of me, and here I am. So that's kind of how it happened. But I didn't start my YouTube channel hoping to be discovered or famous. And I think that is when people fail, because when it's not genuine, people will see through it. And you will not get recognized as a voice of passion and purpose. You'll be recognized as somebody that just wants to get on a TV screen, and it comes through. So that was it. That's how it ended up becoming. So back to influence. There's no better way to stay anchored on what you're all about with this podcast. There's no better way to build influence than by anchoring your voice on a purpose that is much bigger than the desire for money or recognition. Period.
You guys can't
The
see
rest
me,
follows.
but I am nodding my head a lot. I mean, that's the key point. Anybody who's come to me who just wants to be famous, it will never work. I will never take on anybody who just wants to be famous, because really people don't want to put in the work. It requires so much work. It needs to be something bigger than fame. So, yeah.
And by the way, it's the only thing that will keep you going. Well, how do you think you stay still up at night, pulling all-nighters, eating crappy food, wondering where the heck the next paycheck is going to come from? And it's only because purpose keeps moving you. Now, here's a catch. Purpose doesn't mean becoming also blinded and delusional about how good your idea or business is. The purpose should not change. Now, the methodology or how the purpose comes to life may evolve, because you need to evolve with the times. Maybe your line of services need to evolve, or your design, or whatever it is you do. But when you know that at the center, like in my case, I believe it is mathematically impossible to achieve your full potential in business without cultural intelligence. I believe that. And that is my mission, to elevate it and preach it and teach it and whatever I need to do. How I do it has evolved. We do big data now. We may do these cultural intelligence accelerators that I'm doing now, or we do the traditional marketing services thing, but it has evolved. But the why has not changed. That's the key.
So can you talk to me a little bit about what you're doing with Dreamers Ventures and when you started that?
Yes, that goes back into my why. Why? And a lot of people look at me like I have three heads. It's like, where is she all over the place? I'm like, I'm not. Everything is threaded by the priority to elevate the role that culture plays as a means to drive profit and growth. So in this quest to kind of like elevate the story and the economic, a diverse America, I bumped into a number that got me kind of mad, which was the fact that while minorities and women are driving most of the growth in new company creation, that means they're driving the growth in entrepreneurship in America, there is a huge gap in revenues. So for minorities, and it's 30 or 31 cents to the dollar versus non-minority owned businesses, what they're earning on average per year. So everyone kind of gets all up in arms with like equal pay and things like that. But there's an equal pay on talk about enough in the revenue side of businesses. By the way, women also have a huge equity gap as it relates to revenues, et cetera. So I said, okay, but why? What's happening? And I realized that people like me who are winging it in a way because you're here by yourself without a network, without mentors. First time I had a credit card, I was in my late 20s because of my immigration status, whatever. So I didn't build credit until later in life. You have more barriers to be able to scale quicker as a business owner. And I said, okay, we can complain about the numbers and throw ourselves a pity party or do something about it. So I said, okay, could I create a platform that helps people that look like me to have access and democratize access to the knowledge, to the mentors, to the investors and the opportunities. So we still start filling the gap in revenues that we're experiencing. By the way, that should be important to everyone in America because minorities are the ones and women are the ones driving 100% of growth in entrepreneurship in America. That means you pull us out and new firm or new company creation would be shrinking. And these are numbers from like the government. I'm not just making this up or some private report. This is public information from like a government agency. So because of that, I said, okay, could I help my own? So this became my social enterprise. Created Dreamers Ventures as an empowerment platform that will curate access to the experts and the knowledge so that we could take it on the road and have under the same roof the experts and the entrepreneurs that are often not exposed to these kinds of experts that happen to be minorities and primarily Hispanic. Now, why am I being choosy with Hispanic? Obviously, it pulls my heart and it's my cause and it's who I represent. But at the same time, I noticed there was, women have 1 million women entrepreneur conferences. And, Black enterprise is Black enterprise. We don't have Hispanic enterprise. There's no summits or events or anything curated like this for Latino entrepreneurs. So I said, okay, let's create it. So that's what I'm up to now. It launched this week in New York City at the Google headquarters in New York. And we're going across 6 different cities, putting incredibly inspirational and the best of the best on stage that look like the audience. Because it's people stories that are untold. Like at my event, I had one of the members from the Unanue family who are the founders and owners of Goya Foods. So that's who we have. That often we never see on the stages. So that's it. That's Dreamers Ventures, my social enterprise trying to help us all pull and push each other up.
So you do so much stuff. You're also a mom. Do you have any time management secrets to share with me?
My husband is an entrepreneur as well. So we're both equally crazy and equally busy. So it's not like he can pick up the slack or something. No, we both have to be on super coordinated schedules. There's no set roles, like things get done if they need to get done. Like, oh, dirty laundry, I'll pick it up. Oh, got to do the lunch. Oh, I'll pick it up. Whomever's closest to the thing that needs to get done just does it without any spoken rules about it. So a great partner is key. And also treasuring the moments that count. So on the weekends, I am very intentional about putting away my phone. I'm not a doctor. I'm not saving lives. It can probably wait a couple of hours. But we've become so obsessed with immediacy and responding right away that you may miss out on precious moments. And it's just an hour. I have toddlers. They can't, focus on one thing for more than 10 minutes, but make the 10 minutes count, So being intentional about quality time is very, very important. And learning to say no. I've had to learn to do that. I'm not that good at it yet, but I'm getting better. To prioritize. Is this aligned to my purpose? Is this going to help me impact more people in more places and therefore potentially grow my business? And if the answer is no, then you got to say no. And leave that precious time for your loved ones, your family, and also to stay focused. So I hope that helps, but it takes being disciplined for sure, and a great partner to help you along the way.
So then what's next for you and all of your businesses?
I definitely want to. I think the quest doesn't end. Like I said, my dream is to make this notion and definition of cultural intelligence a mainstream capability that everyone, not only across America, but the world, recognizes as the new norm for winning in a diverse marketplace. So with that, I have a lot of runway and still a lot of work to do. Expanding globally is definitely something that is very quickly happening to our company. Definitely writing the book. I can't wait. I keep slacking on it. So folks listening, learn from me. Don't put it off. Just do it. And I got to put myself on that. Definitely doing that. And definitely CulturIntel too, which aligns with my vision of becoming like the leading expert in what it means to live and achieve cultural intelligence in a data-driven way. I would love for CulturIntel to reach, just as Nielsen has become the norm for many companies or organizations to know ratings or that, or the Associate Press is like the source for like news. I want CulturIntel to be that source for cultural intelligence around the world. So big and bold, so I have a lot of work to do, but never deviating from that anchor right at the center, which is cultural intelligence for all as a competitive advantage for growth.
Well, I really appreciate all your time. What you're doing is incredible, and I can't wait to read your new book whenever it is coming out. Where can people find you?
So people can find me on Twitter at Lili Gil. My personal page too is lilianagil.com. Same thing on Facebook, Lili Gil. So kind of like Lili Gil, Liligil is where you kind of find me in the different channels so that you can ask me questions and connect.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Beyond Influential. If you found value in this week's episode, please rate and subscribe on iTunes. I'd love to know who you find influential. You can let me know on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Brittany Crystal, KRYSTLE, or visit my website, brittanycrystal.com.
Beyond Influential.